Talia Mendes never imagined that a mocking invitation to a millionaire's ball would become the night that would change everything. She stood in the cramped kitchen of Eleganza Catering in Auckland, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped flour from her apron, the scent of roasted garlic and fresh herbs filling the air. Through the frosted glass door, she could hear the murmur of voices in the front office, laughter that sounded expensive, detached. She had been working there for 10 years, always in the background, always invisible, until that Friday afternoon when Mariana Quintella decided to play a cruel game. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment, and let's get to our story. Talia was 31 years old and looked younger, despite the exhaustion that lived permanently behind her dark eyes. Her hair, thick and naturally wavy, was always tied back in a practical bun during work hours. Her uniform, a simple white chef's jacket and black pants, hung loosely on her frame, a frame that carried the weight of responsibilities far beyond her own survival. Every morning at 5:30, she woke in the 46-square-meter apartment in Mount Eden that she shared with her younger sister Julia, 23, a nursing student at Auckland University. The rent was $2,100 a month. Her salary was $4,350. Every single dollar had a destination before it even reached her bank account. That particular Friday, Talia was preparing canapés for a client tasting session. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, arranging smoked salmon on blini, drizzling lemon-infused crème fraîche, placing microgreens with tweezers. This was the work she knew, the work that had fed her and Julia for a decade, the work that kept them afloat after their mother died 7 years ago from complications of diabetes, leaving behind only debts and 2 daughters who had to learn to survive alone. Talia had learned to cook from her mother in their small kitchen in Mangere, watching as she transformed simple ingredients into something that tasted like love, like home. Now she cooked for people who would never know her name. Edward Almeida walked into Eleganza Catering at precisely 2:15 that afternoon, and the atmosphere shifted. He was 34, tall, with dark hair graying slightly at the temples, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Talia's monthly rent. His presence filled the room, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty, the kind that comes from never having to prove yourself to anyone. He owned Almeida Events, a luxury company that generated in $24 million annually, organizing weddings, corporate galas, and charity balls for Auckland's elite. His personal net worth was estimated at $120 million. He was there to finalize the contract for the annual Almeida Family Charity Ball, an event with 200 guests to be held at the family mansion in Remuera, Auckland's most exclusive neighborhood. Talia caught a glimpse of him through the glass door as she carried a tray of finished canapés to the display counter. Mariana Quintella was with him. Of course she was. Mariana, 32, Edward's ex-wife of 2.5 years, heiress to the Quintella shipping fortune, still frequented the same social circles, still attended the same events, still inserted herself into Edward's business affairs under the pretense of maintaining family connections. She wore a cream silk blouse and tailored trousers, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her jewelry understated, but undoubtedly expensive. Her laugh was crystalline, practiced. Talia returned to the kitchen, focusing on the next batch of canapés. She didn't belong in that world, the world of contracts worth thousands of dollars for a single night's food, the world where people like Edward and Mariana moved effortlessly. She belonged here, behind closed doors, creating beautiful things that others would consume without thought. But fate, or perhaps cruelty, had different plans. The kitchen door swung open. Talia looked up. Mariana stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning the industrial kitchen with barely disguised distaste. Behind her, Edward was visible in the hallway, reviewing paperwork with the catering manager. Mariana's gaze landed on Talia, and something flickered in her expression, something calculating. "Talia, darling," Mariana said, her voice honey-sweet and venomous simultaneously. You work so hard back here, don't you? Talia straightened, wiping her hands on a towel. Yes, Mom. Can I help you with something? Mariana stepped fully into the kitchen, heels clicking on the tile floor. Actually, I wanted to extend a personal invitation. The Almera ball, next Saturday night at 9. You should come as a guest. Talia blinked. The words didn't make sense. I'm sorry, what? The ball, Mariana repeated, louder now, drawing Edward's attention from the hallway. Black tie, gala event. You've worked so many of our events from behind the scenes. Don't you deserve to experience one from the other side? To see what it's like to be a guest instead of staff? Heat rose in Talia's cheeks. She understood immediately what this was. Not kindness, mockery, an invitation designed to humiliate, to put her in a situation where she would be obviously out of place, uncomfortable, a source of entertainment for people like Mariana. Edward appeared in the doorway now, frowning slightly, sensing something off in the exchange, but not intervening. Talia met Mariana's eyes directly. That's very generous of you. I'll think about it carefully. Mariana's smile widened. Please do. It would be wonderful to have you there. She turned and left, her perfume lingering in the kitchen, expensive and cloying. For 2 weeks, Talia debated. The invitation haunted her thoughts during the long commutes on public buses, during the late nights preparing meal plans for Julia's university week, during the quiet moments before sleep when her mind refused to rest. She knew Mariana wanted her to either not show up, confirming she knew her place, or show up awkward and embarrassed, confirming she didn't belong in that world. Julia, pragmatic and fierce, had her own opinion. Go, Julia said one evening, as they ate rice and beans at their small kitchen table. The window opened to let in the mild Auckland autumn air. Show them you have more class in your pinky finger than they have in their whole bodies. With what dress? Talia asked, exhausted. I haven't $240 saved for emergencies. That won't buy anything close to appropriate. Julia leaned forward. Then make something. Remember what Mom taught us? Talia did remember. Their mother, seamstress when she wasn't cleaning houses, had taught both daughters to sew. Talia went to Otara Market the next Saturday morning, spending 2 hours searching through fabric stalls until she found it. Navy blue silk, elegant and simple, ends $180 for enough material. She bought a pattern for ends 15 thread and supplies for another ends $45. That night, after her shift ended at 10, she began. 4 nights, she stayed awake until 3 in the morning, her fingers guiding fabric through the old sewing machine her mother had left behind, the one that still worked if you jiggled the tension dial just right. She cut, pinned, stitched, adjusted. The dress took shape slowly, floor-length with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt, simple but striking, the kind of elegance that came from design rather than price tag. By Friday night, it was finished. Talia hung it on the back of her bedroom door and stared at it, terrified and determined in equal measure. Saturday arrived. At 8:30 that evening, Talia stood in front of the bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly, hugging curves she usually hid under chef's uniforms. Her hair fell in natural waves past her shoulders, styled with nothing but patience and a blow-dryer. Her makeup was minimal, borrowed from Julia, just enough to highlight her dark eyes and full lips. She looked like someone else, someone who belonged. Julia whistled from the doorway. Damn, sis, you're going to break hearts. Talia's hands trembled as she fastened simple silver earrings, the only jewelry she owned besides her mother's wedding ring, on a chain around her neck. I'm terrified. Good, Julia said. Use it. The ride-sharing app showed $36 for the trip from Mount Eden to Remuera. Talia confirmed the booking, her stomach twisting. That was grocery money for 3 days. The driver arrived in a clean sedan, and Talia climbed into the back seat, careful not to wrinkle the dress. The city passed by outside the windows, transitioning from modest neighborhoods with cafes and laundromats to streets lined with trees older than she was. Gates that opened to properties you couldn't see from the road, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. The Almira mansion appeared at the end of a private drive, 3 stories of creamstone and glass, lit from within like a jewel box. Cars lined the circular driveway, luxury vehicles Talia recognized only from advertisements. A valet parking attendant approached as the driver stopped, but Talia waved him off, paying the driver through the app and stepping out alone. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from the manicured gardens. She could hear music, the sophisticated murmur of an orchestra warming up, laughter floating from the open doors. The security guard at the entrance studied her with undisguised suspicion. "Name?" "Talia Mendes." He scanned his tablet, frowned. "You're not on the guest list." Panic fluttered in her chest, but Talia kept her voice steady. "Mariana Quintella invited me personally. I have the message." She pulled out her phone, showed the text exchange, Mariana's syrupy words confirming the invitation in writing. The guard hesitated, then radioed someone. 30 seconds that felt like hours passed before he received confirmation. "You can go in." Talia climbed the wide stone steps, her heart hammering against her ribs. The entrance hall was a cathedral of marble and crystal, a chandelier the size of her entire apartment hanging from a ceiling painted with what looked like classical frescoes. Staff in crisp uniforms moved efficiently with trays of champagne. Guests clustered in small groups, their voices refined, their clothing screaming designer labels. Talia recognized the difference immediately. Her dress was beautiful, but theirs cost what she earned in 6 months. She took a breath, straightened her spine, and walked forward. The main ballroom opened before her, and the sight stole her breath. 6-meter ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Auckland's harbour lights, a full orchestra positioned on a raised platform, 200 guests in tuxedos and gowns that probably required their own insurance policies. Crystal chandeliers refracted light into rainbows across the polished marble floor, and everyone stopped, heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Talia felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes assessing her, categorizing her, trying to place her. She didn't belong to any of the families they knew, didn't move with the casual ownership of someone born to this world. She was an anomaly, and in rooms like this, anomalies were dissected. Across the ballroom, near a cluster of men in expensive suits discussing what sounded like investment portfolios, Edward Almira had been only half listening. His mind was elsewhere, on the emptiness of events like this, the performance of socializing with people who measured worth in zeros on bank statements. Then he glanced up and saw her. Time didn't actually stop. He knew that intellectually, but something in his perception stuttered, rearranged itself. The woman crossing his ballroom was striking not because of obvious beauty, but because of something harder to define. Confidence that seemed hard-won rather than inherited. Elegance that came from posture rather than price tags. She moved through the crowd with dignity, not arrogance, and Edward found he couldn't look away. "Who is that woman?" he asked his cousin Marcus, standing beside him. Marcus squinted. "No idea. New money from Wellington, maybe, or someone's +1. Edward excused himself from the conversation, drawn forward by curiosity he couldn't explain. He intercepted Talia near the champagne station, where she had accepted a glass from a server and was holding it like a prop she wasn't sure how to use. "Good evening," Edward said, extending his hand. "Edward Almira, welcome to my family's home." Talia turned, and recognition flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Almira, thank you for having me." "You have me at a disadvantage," he said smoothly. "I don't believe we've met, but you clearly know who I am." A small smile played at her lips. "We've met, actually, several times. I'm Talia Mendes. I work for Eleganza Catering. I've prepared food for at least 15 of your events over the past year, but I'm usually in the kitchen, so there's no reason you'd remember." Edward felt heat rise in his face, embarrassment at his own obliviousness. "I apologize. That's inexcusable on my part." "It's reality," Talia said. No bitterness in her tone, just fact. "People in kitchens are invisible to people in ballrooms. Then let me correct that, Edward said. Tell me about yourself. What brings you out of the kitchen tonight? Talia hesitated, then decided on honesty. Your ex-wife invited me. I think as a joke, actually, to see if I'd show up and embarrass myself. Edward's jaw tightened. That sounded exactly like something Mariana would do. And are you? Embarrassed? Terrified, Talia admitted, but refusing to show it. Something in her directness captivated him. No false modesty, no performance. Just honesty. They moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the main crowd, and started talking. What began as polite conversation deepened rapidly. Edward asked about her work, and Talia described the artistry of high-end catering, the pressure of perfection, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful that lasted only moments. He asked what she read, and she surprised him by discussing witty Ihimaera and Patricia Grace with the insight of someone who didn't just read, but absorbed literature. I go to the Mount Eden Library every Tuesday evening, she said. It's free, and they have an incredible collection. Edward realized with a start that he owned probably 500 books he'd never read, decorating shelves in his Parnell penthouse. When had he last read for pleasure? He asked about her dreams, expecting modest answers, but Talia's eyes lit with genuine passion. I want my own restaurant someday, she said. Contemporary New Zealand cuisine, Pacific influences, using indigenous ingredients in modern ways. Not fusion for the sake of trend, but honest food that tells a story about who we are as a country. That's ambitious, Edward said, impressed. That's survival, Talia corrected. Working for other people's dreams gets exhausting. I want to build my own. They talked for 40 minutes without pause. Edward forgot about his guests, forgot about the event unfolding around them, forgot about everything except the woman in the simple navy dress who saw the world with clarity he'd lost somewhere in his climb to wealth. Talia forgot her fear, forgot she was supposed to feel out of place, forgot everything except the surprising discovery that Edward Almira, millionaire event mogul, listened when she spoke, as if her words actually mattered. Then Mariana's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Excuse me, everyone, Mariana's voice rang out, amplified by the microphone she'd taken from the orchestra conductor's stand. 200 faces turned toward her, conversations dying mid-sentence. She stood on the raised platform, backlit by chandeliers, her smile sharp and dangerous. I want to share something delightful with all of you. Edward's stomach dropped. He knew that tone, the false sweetness that preceded cruelty. Beside him, Talia went very still, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. You see that absolutely stunning woman over there in the navy dress? Mariana continued, pointing directly at Talia. That's Talia Mendes. She works for our catering company. She's a cook. I invited her tonight because I thought, wouldn't it be a wonderful cultural experience for her? To see how the other half lives, to experience a real ball instead of just preparing the food for one. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not kind laughter. The sharp, cutting kind that people used to establish hierarchy, to remind everyone where the lines were drawn. Talia heard someone near her whisper, "Oh my God, that's priceless," and someone else murmur, "How embarrassing for her, poor thing." Edward saw the tears form in Talia's eyes, saw her blink them back furiously. He moved to intervene, but Talia was already moving forward, cutting through the crowd toward the platform. She climbed the 3 steps, and Mariana's smile faltered slightly as Talia reached for the microphone. "Can I have this?" Talia asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Mariana hesitated, then handed it over, uncertain where this was going. Talia turned to face the 200 guests, all watching her now with mixtures of pity, amusement, and uncomfortable curiosity. She took a breath, felt her mother's wedding ring press against her chest under the dress, and spoke. "Everything Mariana just said is true," Talia began, her voice clear and strong. "I am a cook. I work for Eleganza Catering. I earn ends 4,350 a month. I live in a 46 square meter apartment in Mount Eden with my younger sister who's studying nursing. Our rent is $2,100 a month, which means every dollar I earn has a purpose before I even touch it. I made this dress myself because I don't have ends of $4,000 to spend on designer clothing. I came here tonight on a ride share that cost me ends of $36, which is my grocery money for 3 days. The laughter had stopped. The ballroom was silent except for the distant sound of harbor waves against the shore below. Talia continued, I came here knowing it was probably a setup, knowing I was meant to feel small and out of place. And honestly, I did feel that for about 10 minutes, until I realized something important. She looked directly at Mariana. Some people in this room have extraordinary wealth, but wealth and class are not the same thing. I have dignity. I have character. I work 16-hour days to support my family, and I'm proud of every single meal I've cooked, even if the people eating it never knew my name. What I discovered tonight is that money can buy mansions and designer dresses and catered balls, but it can't buy integrity, and some of you are absolutely empty where that matters. She handed the microphone back to Mariana, whose face had gone pale. The room remained frozen in shocked silence. Talia descended from the platform, her legs shaking but her head high. She walked toward the entrance, not running, not fleeing, just leaving with what remained of her dignity intact. Behind her, whispers erupted like wildfire, but she didn't turn back. Edward stood paralyzed for 3 seconds, his mind racing. Then he moved, pushing through the crowd without apology, ignoring Marcus calling his name, ignoring the guests trying to stop him with questions. He reached the entrance hall just as Talia was descending the front steps into the garden, her silhouette illuminated by pathway lights leading toward the harbor view. "Talia, wait, please!" he called. She stopped at the edge of the garden, where manicured lawns gave way to native plantings, the Auckland skyline glittering across the water in the distance. The night air was cooler now, carrying the salt scent of the sea. When she turned, tears were streaming down her face, but her expression was fierce, not broken. "Why did you follow me?" she asked, voice rough with suppressed emotion. "To apologize for your ex-wife, to offer pity, to get some kind of resolution so you can go back to your party without feeling guilty?" Edward stopped 3 meters away, giving her space. "No, I followed you because in the 40 minutes we talked tonight, I felt more alive, more present, more genuinely interested in another human being than I have in the past 2.5 years of my entire life." Talia laughed, but it was bitter. "That's a nice line." "It's the truth," Edward said quietly. "And because I'm an idiot who should have noticed you months ago. You've been creating food for my events, and I never once went into the kitchen to meet the people making it happen. I treated you like you were invisible, just like everyone else in that room. Mariana's cruelty was loud, but mine was silent, and I'm not sure which is worse." "Yours wasn't personal," Talia said. "Hers was. That doesn't make it right." Edward took a step closer. "You're right about everything you said in there. Most of those people are empty. I've spent years in rooms like that, surrounded by wealth and absolutely suffocated by meaninglessness. Tonight, talking with you, was the first time in forever that I felt like I was having a real conversation with someone who saw the world clearly." Talia wiped her eyes, smudging mascara she'd applied so carefully hours earlier. "Edward, you're a millionaire. I'm a cook who just spent her emergency fund on fabric to make a dress so I could prove a point to someone who wanted to humiliate me. We exist in completely different universes. This doesn't work in any reality." "Why not?" Edward challenged. "Because your family, your friends, your entire world will see me as exactly what Mariana said. The poor cook who tried to crash a party. The woman who doesn't belong. Your mother will probably offer me money to disappear. Your business partners will think I'm after your fortune. And honestly," her voice cracked, "I don't have the energy to fight that battle. I'm exhausted, Edward. I'm exhausted from working 16-hour days, from budgeting every single purchase, from making sure my sister can finish university, from pretending I'm not terrified every month that something will break and I won't be able to fix it. I can't also fight to prove I'm not a gold digger to people who will never believe it. Edward felt the truth of her words like a weight on his chest. She was right. His world would chew her up. His mother would absolutely try to pay her off. His social circle would whisper and speculate, but standing there in the garden, with the sounds of the ball fading behind them and this extraordinary woman preparing to walk away, he made a decision. "Then screw my world," he said. "I want to know yours." Talia stared at him. "What?" "I don't want you to enter my world and be judged by it," Edward said. "I want you to let me into yours. No mansions, no events, no performance, just real life. Your neighborhood, your routine, your world." He paused. "Let me take you home tonight. Not in some grand gesture, just as a safe ride so you don't have to pay another N36. And tomorrow, if you're willing, we could meet for coffee. Somewhere in Mount Eden, somewhere normal. No champagne, no ballrooms, no audiences. Just us, figuring out if that 40-minute conversation was a fluke or something worth exploring." Talia searched his face, looking for dishonesty, for pity, for anything that would confirm this was another game. But she saw only sincerity, vulnerability even. This powerful man standing in his own garden, asking permission to step outside the only world he'd ever known. "One coffee," she said finally. "Tomorrow afternoon. There's a place called Moulton on Dominion Road. 3 o'clock. "I'll be there," Edward promised. He drove her home himself, in his Range Rover that probably cost more than Talia would earn in 5 years. The ride was mostly silent, but it wasn't uncomfortable. When they reached the modest apartment building on Mount Eden, Talia opened the door, then paused. "Thank you for tonight. Not for the party, for following me." "Thank you for giving me a second chance," Edward replied. She disappeared into the building, and Edward sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the ordinary street, the ordinary building, this ordinary neighborhood where something extraordinary had just begun. Sunday afternoon arrived with Auckland's typical autumn weather, clouds threatening rain, but holding back, the air crisp and clean. Edward arrived at Moulton Cafe 15 minutes early, parking his Range Rover 2 blocks away because he sensed pulling up in it would send the wrong message. The cafe was small, tucked between a laundromat and a vintage bookstore, with mismatched furniture and local art on exposed brick walls. The kind of place where coffee cost Nzalo $4.50 instead of Nzalo $8, where regulars knew the barista's name, where life felt accessible. Talia arrived exactly at 3, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a ponytail, no makeup. She looked more herself than she had in the navy dress, more comfortable, more real. Edward stood as she approached, and they sat at a corner table, ordering flat whites and slices of carrot cake that the menu promised was homemade. "Did you survive the aftermath?" Talia asked, direct as always. Edward laughed ruefully. "I left the ball 20 minutes after you did. Told everyone there was an emergency." Mariana was furious. "My mother called me 4 times before I finally answered this morning and told her I'd explain later." "And what will you tell her?" "The truth, that I met someone remarkable who made me realize how hollow my life has been." He paused. "Your turn. Did you regret going?" Talia considered. "No. I regret the humiliation, obviously, but not going. I proved something to myself, that I could stand in that room and not apologize for who I am." She smiled slightly. "Julia said I'm a badass." Her words, not mine. They talked for 2 hours. The conversation flowed as naturally as it had at the ball, but without the pressure of performance, without eyes watching. Edward asked about her mother, and Talia told him about losing her to diabetes complications, about the year that followed when she was 24 and Julia was 16, trying to figure out how to survive as orphans, with debt collectors calling weekly. She described working double shifts at 3 different restaurants, taking online business courses at night, slowly clawing their way to stability. "I wanted to quit about 1,000 times," Talia admitted, "but Julia needed me. And honestly, quitting felt like betraying my mum's memory. She worked herself to exhaustion giving us a life. The least I could do was keep us together." Edward shared his own story, though it felt almost embarrassing given the contrast. The pressure of family expectations, the business degree his father insisted on, the marriage to Mariana that had been more merger than love, the divorce that revealed how little they'd actually known each other beneath the social performance. "I have everything money can buy," Edward said quietly, "and most days I wake up and don't know why. There's no point to any of it. Build the business, make more money, attend more events, make more money. For what? For the possibility of something different," Talia said, "which you're doing right now." Over the next 3 months, Edward became a regular presence in Mount Eden. He showed up at Moulton every Sunday, then Sundays and Wednesdays, then randomly throughout the week, fitting visits between meetings, sometimes arriving at 9 in the evening just to spend an hour with Talia before she went to bed for her 5:30 wake-up. He met Julia properly on a Thursday night, arriving with takeaway Thai food because Talia had texted that she was too exhausted to cook after a 14-hour shift. Julia assessed him with undisguised suspicion, her nursing textbook spread across the small dining table. "So you're the millionaire?" "And you're the little sister," Edward replied easily. "Talia says you're top of your class." "Talia exaggerates," Julia said, but her expression softened slightly. "What do you want with my sister?" "To know her," Edward said simply. "To learn from her. To figure out if what I think I'm feeling is real." Julia studied him a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but if you hurt her, I know how to insert IVs in very uncomfortable places." Edward laughed. "Noted." They ate together in the cramped apartment, sitting on the worn sofa, watching a baking competition show Julia was obsessed with, and Edward realized he was happier in that moment than he'd been at any 5-star restaurant in years. This was real, messy and complicated and real. Talia's food truck dream came up during a walk through Mount Eden Village on a Saturday morning. They'd been seeing each other for 2 months by then, and the relationship had shifted from curiosity to something deeper, though neither had named it yet. Talia mentioned the dream casually, describing the concept: contemporary New Zealand cuisine with Pacific influences, hangi-inspired cooking methods adapted for street food, indigenous ingredients like kawakawa and horopito used in innovative ways. "How much would it cost to start?" Edward asked. Talia shrugged. "Until $50,000 to $60,000, probably. Truck purchase, commercial kitchen rental, permits, initial supplies, which means it's a pipe dream for at least another decade." Edward went quiet, thinking. The next Monday, he announced a new initiative at Almera Events, a microloan program for hospitality entrepreneurs, focusing on underrepresented communities. Interest rate subsidized, repayment over 3 years, mentorship included. He didn't tell Talia he'd created it with her specifically in mind. When she applied along with 37 other candidates, her proposal was evaluated blindly by an independent panel. She won on merit. "Ensdal $58,000, Talia said when she received the approval letter, her hands shaking as she held it. "Edward, this is real." "You earned it," Edward said. "Your proposal was brilliant. Now you have to execute it." "I'll pay back every cent," Talia promised. "I know you will." The food truck launched 4 months into their relationship. Talia named it Kai Ora, serving contemporary dishes that honored her mother's Pacific Island heritage and New Zealand's indigenous ingredients. The menu was small but perfect. Hangi-pulled pork sliders with kawakawa aioli, horopito spiced kumara fries, rowena bread with smoked fish spread, hangi pie with flaky pastry. Word spread fast. Within 2 weeks, lines formed before opening. Within a month, she was catering private events. Within 2 months, revenue hit and $28,000 monthly. Edward's family discovered the relationship during month 5, when a business associate spotted them having dinner at a modest Vietnamese restaurant in Sandringham and mentioned it to Edward's mother, Patricia Almira. The summons came via text. Sunday lunch at the family home in Remuera, mandatory attendance. Edward knew what was coming. He went anyway. His mother, elegant and formidable at 62, didn't waste time on pleasantries. Who is this woman you've been seen with? Multiple sources tell me she's a caterer, or a cook, or possibly owns a food truck. The stories vary. Her name is Talia Mendez, Edward said calmly. She's all three, and I'm in love with her. His father, Richard, set down his wineglass with a sharp clink. Edward, be serious. I am serious. This is a phase, Patricia said, voice tight. Some kind of rebellion against the divorce, against expectations. You're dating down to prove a point. Edward's jaw tightened. I'm dating someone who has more integrity, more intelligence, more genuine kindness than anyone in our social circle, including us. She's using you, his mother said flatly. For money, for connections, for upward mobility. She's not. She's paying back the business loan at commercial interest rates. She refuses gifts. She won't even let me pay for dinner half the time because she says it makes her feel like she owes me something. Patricia stood, walked to her purse, returned with a checkbook. She wrote for 30 seconds, tore off the check and placed it on the table. Enzalo, $130,000. Give her this. Tell her it's a one-time payment to walk away quietly. No scandal, no drama. She gets financial security. You get to move on with someone appropriate. Edward stared at the check, fury rising in his chest. You actually think this will work? It always works, his mother said coldly. People have a price. Edward picked up the check, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket. I'll give her your message, exactly as you stated it. He left without another word, driving straight to Talia's apartment. She was in the small kitchen, testing a new recipe for the truck, the space filled with the aroma of slow-cooked meat and herbs. She smiled when she saw him, then frowned at his expression. What happened? Edward pulled out the check, handed it to her. Talia unfolded the check, read the amount, read it again. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, understanding, hurt, and finally cold anger. She looked up at Edward. Your mother thinks she can buy me off. Yes, for ends $130,000. Apparently that's my price tag in her estimation, Edward said bitterly. She said it always works, that everyone has a price. Talia walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out scissors, and cut the check into precise pieces. She gathered them, walked to Edward, and placed the fragments in his hand. Tell your mother that your worth isn't measurable in dollars, and neither is mine. Tell her that if she thinks love is a transaction, then she's never actually experienced it. Edward looked at the shredded check in his palm, then at Talia, and felt something shift permanently in his chest. I love you, he said. I should have said it before, but I love you. Not the idea of you, not the novelty of someone different. Your strength, your honesty, your refusal to compromise who you are for anyone's comfort. Talia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you too, which is terrifying because I don't know how this ends. I don't know if you'll choose your family over me, and honestly, I'd understand if you did. They're your family. They have 30 days, Edward said quietly. 30 days to accept you as part of my life, to treat you with the respect you deserve, or I walk away from the family business completely. I'll build something new. With you, if you'll have me. Edward, you can't. I can, and I will. He pulled out his phone, composed a message to his mother with the photo of the shredded check, and sent it with a simple caption. You have 1 month to apologize to Talia in person, or you lose me. Your choice. The response came within minutes. His mother's text was curt. You're making a mistake. But 3 days later, a formal invitation arrived for Sunday lunch, addressed to both Edward and Talia. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. Talia accepted, though her hands shook as she dressed for the occasion in her one professional outfit, the same navy dress she'd made for the ball, now cleaned and pressed. The lunch was excruciating. Patricia and Richard Almira were polite, rigidly so, asking perfunctory questions about Kai Ora, about Julia's studies, about nothing that actually mattered, but they were trying, in their limited capacity. Edward's younger brother, Marcus, surprisingly, was warmer, genuinely interested in the food truck concept, asking detailed questions about menu development and supply chain logistics. By the end of the meal, Patricia had softened fractionally. "I apologize for my earlier solution," she said stiffly as Talia and Edward prepared to leave. "It was inappropriate. It wasn't a real apology, not the kind that acknowledged harm or sought forgiveness." But Talia nodded. "Thank you for saying that." Over the following months, Edward's presence in Talia's world became permanent. He rented a smaller apartment in Mount Eden, deliberately choosing modest over luxurious, wanting to be close to her, to Julia, to the life they'd built. He worked remotely 3 days a week, spending mornings helping Talia with Kai Ora's administrative tasks, managing permits and licenses and business registrations, the unglamorous work that 8 times she didn't have. He learned to cook under her instruction, badly at first, burning rice and oversalting everything, but gradually improving until he could competently prep ingredients while she handled the complex techniques. They fought sometimes. Real fights about real things. About Edward's instinct to solve problems with money, offering to pay for Julia's textbooks or cover emergency expenses, and Talia's fierce pride that interpreted help as pity. About Talia working 16-hour days and refusing to hire staff because she didn't trust anyone else to maintain her standards, and Edward's worry that she'd collapse from exhaustion. About the fundamental differences in how they'd learned to move through the world, him with the assumption of safety nets, her with the knowledge that falls could be fatal. But they worked through it, slowly, with effort, with the conscious choice to stay and communicate rather than retreat into pride or hurt. 8 months after the ball, Kai Ora had become a genuine success. Revenue had climbed to $55,000 monthly. Food bloggers raved. A local television show featured Talia's story. 2 restaurant groups had approached about franchising, though she'd declined, wanting to maintain control and quality. Edward launched a second division of Almera events, focused on accessible celebrations for middle-class families, weddings and anniversaries and graduations that didn't require second mortgages, proving that elegance didn't require excess. He and Talia were building something together, not by merging their worlds, but by creating a new one that honored both. One evening in month 8, Edward showed up at Kai Ora at closing time. Talia was alone, cleaning the griddle, exhausted but satisfied. The truck had been parked at a festival in Western Springs, and the day had been relentlessly busy, gloriously successful. "How was it?" Edward asked, climbing into the truck's tight service space. "Sold out by 6, Talia said, grinning. "Had to close early because we literally ran out of food. That's never happened before." "That's incredible." Edward watched her work for a moment, then said, "I need you to try something." He pulled a container from his bag. Inside was a dish he'd spent the entire afternoon preparing under Marcus's guidance, since his brother had turned out to be a surprisingly talented home cook. Hangi-style pork, but with Edward's own twist, slow-cooked with kawakawa and horopito, but finished with a reduction sauce made from Central Otago Pinot Noir and Manuka honey. He'd made Rowena bread from scratch, crispy on the outside and soft inside, perfect for soaking up the sauce. Talia took a bite, chewed slowly, her expression shifting through surprise to delight to something deeper. "Edward, this is extraordinary. The balance is perfect. The wine reduction cuts the richness without overwhelming the horopito. This could absolutely go on the menu." "Really?" He felt absurdly pleased, like a student receiving praise from a master. "Really?" Talia took another bite, then paused. "Wait, why are you nervous?" Edward was nervous, his heart hammering. He set down the container, took both her hands in his. The food truck's interior was cramped, smelling of spices and char and hard work. The Auckland night visible through the service window. This wasn't a mansion or a fancy restaurant. It was Talia's space, her creation, the physical manifestation of her dreams, made real through sheer determination. "Talia Mendez," Edward said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "These past 8 months with you have been the most real, most meaningful, most challenging and rewarding of my entire life. You've taught me what actually matters. Not wealth or status or maintaining appearances, but presence, integrity, showing up, building something genuine even when it's hard. Talia's eyes were wide, her hands tightening around his. "I don't want to be your boyfriend anymore," Edward continued. "I want to be your partner in everything. Marry me, not so I can take care of you because you don't need taking care of, not so you can join my world because honestly I prefer yours. Marry me so we can be partners. In life, in business if you want, in building whatever comes next. Together." He pulled out a ring, not ostentatious, a simple band with a single stone, elegant and understated, exactly what he knew she'd want. Talia stared at it, then at him, tears streaming down her face. "You're proposing in my food truck. Is that wrong?" "It's perfect," she said, laughing through tears. "But only if you promise to do dishes. Forever. Deal?" "Then yes. Absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed in the cramped space, tasting of spices and hope and the future they'd build together. Outside, Auckland continued its evening rhythm, lights reflecting off harbour water, the city alive and indifferent and beautiful. They married 4 months later, in a ceremony that perfectly represented who they'd become together. The venue was Mount Eden's Community Hall, decorated simply with native flowers and fairy lights. Half the guests were from Edward's world, family who'd gradually accepted Talia, business associates who'd watched the transformation with varying degrees of skepticism and respect, Marcus who served as best man. The other half was from Talia's Eleganza catering staff who'd worked alongside her for years, neighbours from the Mount Eden apartment building, Julia's university friends, regular customers from Kai Ora who'd become friends. Mariana was not invited. Patricia Almira attended, her expression carefully neutral, but her presence itself a concession. She'd never apologized properly for the bribery attempt, but she'd stopped undermining the relationship, which was its own form of acceptance. Talia wore a dress she and Julia had made together, ivory silk with lace details, contemporary and classic simultaneously. Edward wore a simple suit, no luxury labels, no ostentatious watch, just himself. They wrote their own vows. Edward promised presence over presence, partnership over protection, to always remember that love was a choice made daily, not a destination reached once. Talia promised honesty even when it was uncomfortable, faith in their ability to figure things out together, to never let fear of unworthiness prevent her from accepting love she deserved. When the officiant pronounced them married, the room erupted in applause that mixed accents and languages and social classes into one unified celebration of two people who'd chosen each other, despite every reason society gave them not to. The reception featured food from Kai Ora, naturally. Talia had insisted, wanting to serve the dishes that represented her journey. The hangi-pulled pork sliders that had been the truck's first signature item, the Horopito-spiced Kumara fries Julia had helped perfect, the Rowena bread that connected her to her mother's Pacific Island heritage. Guests ate with their hands, laughed loudly, danced to a playlist that jumped from classical strings to contemporary Pacific music to pop hits. Edward danced with his wife, the word still surreal and perfect, in the modest community hall, and realized he'd never been happier. Not at any exclusive event, not in any five-star venue, not in any moment of his wealthy upbringing. Here, now, with Talia in his arms and their combined communities celebrating around them, he'd found what he'd been searching for without knowing: belonging. Life continued, beautifully ordinary. Kai Ora expanded to a second truck after a year, then opened a small brick-and-mortar location in Grey Lynn after 18 months. Talia maintained creative control, refused to sacrifice quality for growth, built the business methodically, sustainably. She repaid the microloan in 2 years instead of 3 with interest, then used profits to fund loans for 2 other hospitality entrepreneurs, paying forward the opportunity she'd received. Edward's accessible events division grew beyond expectations, proving a market existed for elegant celebrations without excess. He and Talia collaborated sometimes, Kai-Ora catering Almera events bookings, their businesses intertwining naturally. They bought a small house in Mount Eden, nothing ostentatious, just enough space for them and eventually for Julia when she graduated nursing school and needed a place to stay during her first year working at Auckland Hospital. On a Sunday morning 2 years after the wedding, Edward woke to find Talia already awake beside him, watching dawn light filter through their bedroom curtains. The house was quiet, the neighborhood just beginning to stir. Simple sounds. A neighbor's dog barking, morning birds, distant traffic on Dominion Road. "What are you thinking about?" Edward asked, his voice rough with sleep. "How strange happiness is," Talia said. "I spent so many years believing it required big things. Dramatic changes, massive success, escape from struggle. But it's this, isn't it? Sunday mornings, coffee together, Julia in the next room studying for her certification exam, your mother texting yesterday to ask for my hangi recipe, which is maybe her version of actually trying." Edward pulled her closer. "It's this," he agreed, "exactly this." They rose eventually, moved to the kitchen. Edward made coffee, while Talia prepared scrambled eggs with herbs from their small garden, Julia emerging from her room with textbooks under her arm, but accepting breakfast before studying. They ate together at the table Edward had built himself, badly but functionally, from recycled timber. Sunlight streamed through windows, overlooking their modest backyard, where native plants grew in careful disorder. And there, in that ordinary Mount Eden kitchen, with morning light making coffee steam visible, and Julia laughing at something on her phone, and Talia's hand warm in his, Edward understood completely what wealth actually meant. Not the Enzalu $120 million in his investment portfolios, not the successful businesses or the properties or the material accumulation. Wealth was this moment. It was presence. It was the woman who'd entered his life wearing a homemade dress and demolished every assumption he'd built about what mattered. It was chosen family, second chances, the courage to be vulnerable. The daily work of building love through actions rather than declarations. It was knowing that the best decision he'd ever made was following Talia out of that ballroom, into the garden, into her world, into this life they'd constructed together, where success was measured in morning coffee and shared laughter and partnership that honored both their strengths. True wealth wasn't something you acquired. It was something you created with the right person, through showing up daily, through choosing love when fear tried to intervene, through building a life that felt authentic rather than impressive. And that was everything. Yeah.